Command Point is sponsored by Crossfire Games. Use code CommandPoint25 at checkout to get 5% off your next purchase. Link in the description.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Command Point to the 12 Days of Kill Team. And today we are joined by Eric to talk about Brood Brothers. And Eric, I'm specifically interested in talking to you about this team because they were the hotness at the end of second edition, and
Right.
and then it was like new edition came out, and the meta is totally different. It's all elites now. General consensus is they got a little bit worse. But what's interesting is not only did you take them to the World Championships, but you actually got your golden ticket with them in this edition. So
Yeah.
I just think that's pretty cool to talk about.
Yeah, and that's actually why I took them to Worlds, is because when I won the golden ticket with them, it just felt like I had to try and do them justice at Worlds. So,
Yeah, I like it, and I think they're a pretty cool team. They've definitely got they've got a lot going on. It's not like a deathcore situation where they're just like a horrible nerfed horde. I think they're still a pretty legit team. So I
yep.
guess to segue a little bit into the first question here. I mean, for somebody that's getting into Kill Team and they're picking their faction, or they're picking a new faction even. For you, with a lot of experience on Brood Brothers, what would you say is like what's the appeal to this team? Like whether it's playstyle or aesthetic, why do you think people should play Brood Brothers?
What I think is really cool about Brood Brothers is if you're looking for the Horde archetype, you're trying to run around with 10 to 14 little idiots with 7 wounds. I really think that Brood Brothers is the most interesting Horde. I think that they have a lot of really cool specialists. They have really interesting ploys, and there's some really unique plays that you can set up with this team. And then compounding on top of that, you had the Brood Coven. So when you're looking at a new leader, I don't think you should ever drop any of the Brood Coven. So you're always kind of deciding if you're running the Patriarch, you're running the Magus, you're running the Primus, and you kind of have 3 somewhat unique play styles based on who you choose as your leader. So if you're looking into the Horde archetype, Deathcore or Death Krieg, they got kind of neutered. Blooded, I think, are really fun, but they don't scratch the same itch to me as Brood Brothers. I think Brood Brothers are the most fun and most interesting Horde team that's there right now.
Okay, really cool. Yeah, no, I think that they're. I kind of have a fondness for Gene Stealer cult, so I definitely I think the team is very interesting, and like the 3 leaders is just like such a cool dynamic. Yeah, they're a pretty sweet team. So I guess for you, they're also kind of a dense team. Like rules wise, there's a lot going on there. So for you, when you were learning the team, what is something that like after maybe it was a handful of games or just like a few games where like a light bulb went off, and it was like, oh wow, like this thing makes this team easier to play. Like I wish I was thinking about it this way. Like what's a piece of like level up advice for new players, something that you wish you had realized like on your first game?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple things that people might not notice at first glance, because there's a lot of really cool operatives on this team. But I think that your quintessential 2 pieces that you might not notice in your first couple games is the Icon Ward and the Agitator. And the Icon Ward, he's the guy who gives a +1 APL buff within 6 inches for control. Not as good this edition because we have less things to control, but it's still very strong when you can contest your home point with one of your models rather than needing to stack 2 of them to stop a Space Marine from just walking up and yoinking it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is his ability where if someone who is ready dies within 6 inches of him, they can perform a free action, and they can even change their order to do it. So if someone runs up within 2 inches of you, and shoots one of your ready models, if he's within 6 inches of the icon ward, you can throw a crack grenade back. And the other thing is that the icon ward, he has, what is the name of the ploy? I think it is idolization, where you can
Hmm.
change a miss into a hit or a hit into a crit. So he has all these auras off of him. Um, it's really important for you to focus on where his auras are and his placement and keeping him safe. And then the agitator is a little bit more simple. He is just giving you a reroll if any enemies are within 6 inches of him and anyone is shooting or attacking those enemies, you essentially get a reroll. And the whole shtick with Brood Brothers is you trying to stack these crossfire tokens as efficiently as possible. And the agitator is really going to help your reliability with this team because they are hitting on fours. There's a few profiles that hit on threes, but you're pretty much just running fours. And if you're rolling those fours raw, even with all the tricks that Brood Brothers have, you're just gonna dice yourself at a certain point because you just can't push through enough damage hitting on a raw four.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
interesting. The icon ward being such like a pivotal piece to that team is definitely something that I think a lot of people missed the first time through. It's definitely something I missed the first time through until I saw it in action, and he really does. He has a kind of a weight to him in the way that he like kind of affects the board a little bit.
Oh yeah, if you put him somewhere stupid and you lose him early, this the whole efficacy of the team is just gonna drop. So you got to have him in a good place and try and keep him safe. And surprisingly, when he has a 3/5 uh big knife, that is what is on his data card. Late
Yeah.
game, he can actually idolize himself, and you can
Mm.
guarantee 5 damage to finish someone off. So because there's a good chance, if you have at least a reroll, you can hit a 4 up,
Yeah.
and you can turn that into a crit, and you can push through 5 damage, and that can make or break games as well. So he's a very, very important piece that I think he's, in a strange way, the best piece on the team.
Hmm.
And of course, there's a lot of better offensive pieces, but for a support piece, he's really paramount for you to control the board.
Very cool. Very cool. So I guess I wanted to touch with you on loadouts. As far, I mean, this team does actually have more choices than slots to pick your team. So there are you have to kind of like weigh the different options operative wise, especially I mean obviously with the leader as you mentioned earlier, but even down to like the specialists themselves. So I mean, what are your priorities when it comes to list building with this team? Like which operatives are you typically deciding between when it comes to what you leave at home and what you bring?
So just to keep it simple, to start this off, you of course have your three gunners to choose from. Generally, I would say 95% of the games, I'm taking grenade launcher, melta plasma.
Mm-hmm.
There is maybe a case into 7 or 8 wound models on Into the Dark that you could take the flamer, but a lot of times, when you have more bodies, if you have a profile that you can just trade one for one with this team, you're happy enough with that. So the grenade launcher plasma melta is a pretty easy go-to with the gunners. You want to take most of the specialists. The only guys that I'm normally flexing between is medic and knife fighter. I don't personally like the sniper because he has a bolter profile on threes that he can move and shoot with, but his good profile that is devastating three, it's heavy and not even heavy dash. So I struggle uh, with taking advantage of the profiles that are straight heavy. You can't move at all. And we do have access to pervasive, which uh, or insidious, which lets you do the out of activation dash. But there's so many good ways to use that ploy to use it to get my sniper into a position where he can draw line of sight. Just doesn't seem worth it to me. So I generally drop the sniper, and I'm normally my normal flex between medic and knife fighter. And I think those are kind of easy decisions to make. If you're dealing with a shooty team, the medic has a lot more efficacy there. If you can match that knife fighter up into, especially 8 wound profiles, he's actually surprisingly good into because he's 3/4 lethal 5 with ceaseless, and you you're the enemy that you're fighting takes a mortal wound for every miss that they roll. So there's a good chance that they're going to roll a miss. That's going to drop that 8 wound to a 7 wound breakpoint. With your lethal 5 and ceaseless, you're probably going to have a crit and 2 hits, and you can guarantee the kill. And so you can trade it. If you can get the charge off, you can solo an elf with this thing. You're going to be maimed probably. You're probably going to eat a crit, and be left on 1 wound. But if your knife fighter can trade into a corsair with a power weapon, you can't complain about that.
That's pretty good.
So I think those are my main 2 flex pieces. Occasionally, I will flex out the veteran when I also want the medic, but the veteran I think is a really crucial piece. He does have a 4/4 shotgun, and he can get down Mr. President for free.
Yeah.
Uh, so I find less use for him with the Magus as far as get down Mr. President, because I'm not trying to expose my Magus in any way. And if I do that early game, I've never won a game that I've lost my Magus in the early game. That build is really relying on the Magus. So occasionally, because the Magus has the whole team ignore APL modifiers, the medic has a little bit more value there as well to keep your shooters alive. But that's a tough decision to make. And I think when you're starting out on this team, take all the specialists. Your prerogative if you want to deal with the heavy on the sniper. It doesn't really fit my playstyle. Brood Brothers are extremely fast. People don't necessarily realize that when they haven't dealt with them either. So having this kind of stationary guy on the team doesn't really fit with how I like to play them. And just flex between the medic and the knife fighter depending on if you think you're going to take advantage of the medic revive or not.
Gotcha.
And,
Um,
and I think, yeah, that's probably the most I can say about the operatives.
Cool. So, and I know the comments section is going to get mad at me if I don't pick your brain about the leader choice. So, what goes into the leader choice?
Okay, so I am definitely a huge Magus fan. The Magus can dish out mortal wounds. He can dish out stun with just visibility. The mortal wounds he does need a valid target for. But he also buffs the entire team. And when you can have the entire team ignore piercing, ignore stun, and never be injured, you can have some really surprising things happen when you get shot and your plasma gunner is alive on 1 wound. He is just as effective as if he has 7 wounds. So I really, really enjoy the Magus build, especially into the 8 wound breakpoint because he can do up to 8 mortal wounds. And a lot of times what I do into 2 APL models is they're a valid target, I stun them, I bring them down to 1 APL, and I just need to roll 3 2-ups and I kill them, and there's nothing they can do about it. They can't roll saves. It just really high percentage kill. The Primus, I liked him better last edition. What's really funny, I did not actually even bring a Primus model to Worlds.
Oh no.
I did not even have it with me because if I'm gonna run where I'm gonna run the Primus, I prefer to have the Magus. Now, the Primus I think is really strong and he can help you win initiative, and that that helped me, I feel like, more last edition. But this edition I'm more trying to play in the sense that I'm expecting to lose initiative every time. So initiative doesn't necessarily make or break my game plan. And his shooting profile is decent, but when I'm dealing with a bunch of elite meta, you know, 2/4 damage is just pretty you're just fishing for crits, man.
Hmm.
And I would rather have the Magus to stun into elites to prevent double kills, because you can see where the double kills are coming to fruition for your opponent. If I stun that Marine, he can move and massacre one of my guys, but he really wants to set up a double kill, so I can shut that down. And then if I'm not wanting to play in that way, I can take the Patriarch, and the Patriarch is just a cruise missile that you can, with effective positioning, you're really trying to trade 2 for 1 with him and 2 elites. Uh, it's not a guaranteed thing to do, but it's definitely possible, especially when you have the assistance of the veteran to get down Mr. President, uh, and effectively makes your Patriarch, close to 30 wounds, uh,
Yeah.
as far as wounds taken. And so that's kind of my thought process. I do enjoy taking the Patriarch against elites more on Into the Dark, because I can really get up in their face a little bit easier, as long as I don't have to run across these giant rooms that they have, these new
Yeah.
ITD maps. But they all have their place. Personally, I think the Magus is the strongest, and the Magus is gonna give you maybe it's probably the most forgiving play style to start out for new players would
Hmm.
be with this team, is take the Magus and take 2 familiars. You can do a lot of cheeky things with the familiars, especially when we have the line of sight ploy. And you can, especially when you have crit ops that require you to be doing mission actions frequently, the rest of your team can be getting kill op and controlling the board, and you can have these 2, 3 wound dummies chilling on your home point and pushing up and putting pressure onto the center point. You synergize that with the icon ward. You can have that familiar be worth 3 APL. You group activate them. You send them both up there. You can put 5 APL on a point when it really matters and yoink it from underneath your opponent at a crucial time. And I think a lot of people, when they start taking the Patriarch, they see 21 wounds, they see the invuln save, they see 5/6 relentless rending,
Hmm.
and they play a little too aggressive with him. And when you have the Patriarch, it's really, really important that you're making good trades and you have good positioning with him. Because if you throw him away early, then now you're sitting at 10 7 wound models,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you're not gonna have a good time.
Yeah.
So
No.
that's just one thing to keep in mind when you're running the Patriarch. Uh, don't just he can die and he will die. So maybe lean into the Magus early as you learn the team, um, and then start playing around with the other guys as you figure out how you like to run them.
Beautiful. Well, that's like the most thorough loadout question I've gotten so far. We've got time for like one more question before the last one. I just wanted to touch with you on Tack Ops. What do you like to do with Tack Ops? I guess if you can wrap that up really
Okay,
quick.
yeah, I'll do this quick, because I know I'm chatty. Security
We
and
love it.
surveillance, they are, of course, like everybody else, wish I had recon, bro.
Hmm.
Wish I had it. Security, I'm generally taking contain. Contain was actually something that cost me a lot of wins. In other words, I lost some games at Worlds because I leaned too hard into contain, and some really aggressive and really talented players shut that down on me. So it requires a really good game plan and really good positional play to pull off contain, but I do think contain's a really strong ploy. Um, you can take ground if the map allows it, but that's one that I would just be really wary of,
Yep.
and you gotta make those decisions and kind of see into the future in deployment. I think surveillance is really strong when you out activate the other team. So you can use your familiars with super conceal. You can get them into their board half, one of your last activations, and do the surveillance, get you 2 points. especially when you have the line of sight ploy, which I'm really bad. I always forget. Ruthless coordination,
Yes, yeah.
I think, right? So when you have that, now that the familiar is actually another threat that you've set up for your gunners on the other side of the board, because maybe you're drawing line of sight kind of in a flanking way with this familiar to get that surveillance at the end of turning point two. Well, turning point three, they kind of need to take care of this familiar, or you can pay a CP and nuke a guy, lethal five with your crossfire rerolls, plasma shot, and it forces them to make decisions they don't want to make. They don't want to kill a 3-wound model on the opening activation of turning point three, but it's something they have to maybe consider.
Mm-hmm.
And implant, I think, maybe into legionaries, because Warp Coven, you don't really have the ability to control the board. It can be difficult to really get the kills consistently when they're ignoring piercing and all the heals. So you can get some solid points with implant, and even though it's not my favorite tack op, I have to admit that if I had taken implant in a few games at Worlds, um, I'm not saying I would have necessarily won those games, but I would have put some more points on the board. It would have been a
Mm-hmm.
lot closer. And me trying to hold on to contain for my dear life did cost me. So be wary of that, guys. Contain can be denied, and when you're playing these high-level competitive folks, they are gunning for it too. So
Gotcha. Really cool. Okay, so I've got one more question for you, Eric. I'm asking everybody to name for me a personal favorite. It can be a treat, a drink, or it can be a meal that you like to have during the holidays. So what do you got for me?
Oh man, besides whiskey, of course, I gotta go with eggnog, man. Eggnog
Okay.
it's the quintessential, right? I mean, it feels when it's cold, which I'm in Florida now, so it doesn't get that cold, but there's something about Christmas time and just enjoying a glass of eggnog that hits a spot that I don't know if anything else hits it like that.
I love it. That's the third, I want to say, eggnog we've gotten. So you
I'm
are
not
not alone in
surprised.
that. But yeah, Eric, thank you for joining us. This was like super in depth. People are going to love this. So everybody, subscribe to Command Point if you haven't already. I don't know if we're going to be at 10,000 by the time this comes out, but we are getting very, very close in terms of subscribers. Shout out to everybody on the Patreon. And everybody tune in tomorrow for what I believe is the 11th day of Kill Team. And everybody, have a good day. Happy holidays. See you tomorrow.